Consider for a moment how much of the knowledge that you possess was learned from video games. Would you say a lot? A little? None at all? I'm going to guess you're a pretty avid gamer if you're watching this video, so I'm sure you've learned a lot more from video games than you might think. Games are everywhere nowadays. Smartphones, tablets, handhelds, consoles, laptops, and personal computers surround many of us every day. But one possibility that gaming holds for the future is serving as an educational tool. Digital pedagogy has grown an incredible amount in the past decade with things like online lessons, lectures, presentations, group discussions, and virtual classrooms. So it's not a stretch to think about video games making their way into classrooms more in the near future. Actually, games have already been used in classrooms, it just isn't very common yet. The biggest problem with using video games as a way to teach is actually pretty simple. Most educational games are so boring, and they're normally only used for small children. Stuff like the Carmen Sandiego series or the Blaster Learning series. Sure, those old games might have helped kids with their times tables or assisted them in reading, but it's more interesting to consider the role of video games in high school and college classes because video games are now capable of being an asset for higher learning, which wasn't always the case. One interesting example comes from Dr. A. Martin Wainwright of the University of Akron, who has offered a course called History in Video Games 3 times over the past several years. A quick overview of his syllabus reveals quite a few interesting choices in his course design. He starts by covering Sid Meier's Civilization 4 and goes over game instructions, a comparison of the different versions of Civ, an entire unit on game mechanics that covers the game's development and how the civilizations in the game were designed, how AI works, and the impact of modding, all to ask the important question of students: how historical can a game be, and how do Civ 4, Europa Universalis, and Victoria 2 compare in their depictions of history? Students responded to the use of these games positively, and both Wainwright and his students agreed that critical thinking about historical issues was more easily seen in his class that allowed students to apply historical method to video games. One student wrote that they personally enjoyed the scholarship aspect of the class, and that it was interesting to find sources that could be related to video games. Another noted the exposure to Edward Said, Andre Gunther Frank, and other schools of historical thought, and then learning to apply them, which goes beyond the scope of most undergraduate work. Other comments noted other aspects of gaming more focused on mechanics, stuff like, I liked picking out specific details in the games and explaining why they were right or why the developers possibly made them wrong on purpose. It was also evident that students were more engaged in the course than they were in their other classes. One person wrote that it is far more involved with the students. The class seemed more invested in the class. While another said that this course was more open-ended than most courses. It encouraged critical thinking. The outcome of the course showed that students performed well academically and the feedback they provided was positive, and displayed a particular excitement about the inclusion of video games, so it's worth considering this approach to a more diverse array of subjects and fields. Another benefit that video games offer as a learning tool is their diversity. I'm going to quickly walk through a few of the unit topics that were covered in the class we just discussed, and then point to the game that was used to explore it. Each of these units gave students plenty of academic resources to read through to accompany the game used, so keep that in mind. First, a unit on economics and environment that asked students to consider how the Columbian Exchange was incorporated into Civ 4. There was a unit on cultural bias that asked students to analyze Assassin's Creed to reflect on whether or not cultural bias can be avoided. A unit on world systems and world history that used Empire, Total War. A unit on determinism and contingency that requires students to analyze the technology trees and military tactics used in Civ 5 and Medieval, Total War. A unit on combat and brutality that looked at the depiction of combat in Men of War and Call of Duty World at War. And finally, a unit on gender in grand strategy games like Civ City Rome, Civilization, and Total War, as well as gender in social history games like Oregon Trail and Titanic. All of these examples are important because they demonstrate that video games, especially since the late 90s, have become deeper and more exploratory of historical trends and issues that go far beyond names, dates, and places. The portrayal of war, economy, and cultural conflict present in these games creates opportunities for students to critically think and engage with what they are playing in a way that wasn't always possible. I'm not saying that video games should be the dominant form of education, but they could certainly be an accessory that will get students to care more about learning. Reading Edward Said isn't fun. It's complicated, and its discussions of Orientalism and his discussions of how the Western world views the East are written for intellectuals, not for the faint of heart. But having students read excerpts from Said and then thinking about historical portrayals of culture in video games is more entertaining, and it allows them to apply methodology and theory to something that is more relatable to them. It's worth considering how beneficial it can be for learners to care about what they are learning. Video games can make students care. Before I transition into the next part of this discussion, I want to make one thing very clear. There isn't a universal way that can make everyone enjoy learning. Certain people are auditory learners, some are visual, some are kinesthetic or tactile, and many are a combination of all of the above. There is no one medium or pedagogical method that can apply to every single student, but video games fulfill all three to some degree, creating a mixture that can, at the very least, relate to the majority of learners. Video games are often remembered for voice acting or soundtracks, providing an auditory experience. They are obviously visual in their presentations, and they all require the use of your hands or body, so we can check off the tactile box as well. That doesn't mean that games should be the only experience that teachers provide, because I wouldn't truly expect a class of students to learn about theoretical paradigms and logical thinking about any subject just by playing Sid Meier's Civilization. Just like I wouldn't expect a student to come out of a Western Civ class knowing everything about the progression of history just by reading Edward Said. The point is that video games have a great deal of potential to function alongside lectures, textbooks, primary and secondary sources because it allows students to apply their thoughts and ideas in a physical way. The ultimate way they can do so is the subject of the latter half of this video. Virtual and augmented reality is being pushed as a new way to educate. We all know that the Rift, Vive, and PSVR are gaming VR headsets, but they also offer the potential to teach. The Microsoft HoloLens and similar devices provide augmented experiences that aren't all about gaming, and the Oculus and HTC are perfectly aware of the potential for educational experiences that aren't gaming related. Simply search VR education in Google or Internet Explorer Firefox if you're privy to that sort of ineptitude, will bring you to a website called immersiveeducation.com, which states in its introduction that VR, AR is a new industry, and the benefits both inside and outside the classroom are only now being discovered. The company's vision for the future is to see virtual reality become a staple tool for education and training, and we strive to produce quality experiences that demonstrate this. This is the same company that released Titanic VR, Apollo VR, and ER VR, so they are experienced in educational games. Our very own Moriarty even played Titanic and complimented its educational proficiency. It wasn't a game, it was a learning experience, but it was a really cool learning experience. Anecdotal evidence aside, a quick visit to www.iste.org lists over 20 applications that are the hottest in ed tech. Alchemy VR, AugThat, Discover VR, Immersive VR Education, Google Cardboard, Universum, YouTube 360, and a plethora of other services are already pursuing the potential of virtual education. The reason I've went down this road is because the application of virtual and augmented worlds can feel like a game because of the physicality of the experience. These might not be games in the traditional sense, but they feel fun, and they share the same qualities that a game normally does. In the same way that applying historical theories about the progression of civilization can be applied in games like Assassin's Creed, Age of Empires, or Civ, people can apply their learning experience in a headset or lens. The gap between gaming and education is quickly narrowing, and VR is a huge step in that direction that is happening at this very moment. Whether it's traditional games played with controllers or keyboards or next-gen experiences provided by headsets, the important thing that I want to leave you with is that video games can be a part of education without overkilling the idea of the classroom as entertainment. The main problem that teachers have is that students finish a semester without understanding the grand narrative of what they've learned. What this means is they remember things long enough to pass them, and then they move on to the next unit or topic of study. When they're tested over 5 months of material, they simply can't connect or think critically about everything that they've learned. They might pass a test on Roman civilization, but they can't prove that they understand the progression of what they've learned by the time they finish the semester with the Renaissance. The main reason for that problem is that students aren't entertained. We, as individuals, only remember things we identify with. Think about a song that means a lot to you, and you probably have at least one memory that you can connect to that song. Learning works in the same way, but a lecture or a textbook normally can't evoke those memories. video games can. The odds that students will remember and connect with things they learn are more reliable when students are psychologically invested. An example really is Assassin's Creed. Even if the game isn't completely accurate in its portrayal, although it actually does a passable job, people are more apt to know about the history of Catholicism, the Templars, or even Leonardo da Vinci than they would be without thinking, oh hey, I remember playing that, rather than, oh yeah, I remember reading about that for this class one time. I will end this discussion by asking the same question that I did in the beginning. How much do you think you know about history, science, politics, society, race, gender, class, weapons, nationalities, literature, or anything else from playing video games? Of course, teaching with games sounds fun because games are fun, but the reality is that it's actually happening and it will become more prevalent with virtual and augmented realities. What do you think? Is educating with video games a good idea? There are pros and cons, so give me your ideas in the comments because I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoy our talk videos and you find these discussions interesting, be sure to share them with everyone you know. Without your support, I couldn't do this. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys on the next one.